Happy Halloween! You've reached the Spooky Signal Watch, your haunt for movies, television, comics, and morgues. I'm your ghost, Ryan Steens. Join me and a crypt full of co-contributors as we exhume cultural artifacts of the 20th century, boldly explode the 21st, and try to put it all in perspective. Stay terrified. We're going to try to make this horrifying. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Signal Watch, and happy Halloween! Simon and I are here to be spooky and ooky. Simon, you have selected which movie to bring in the Halloween season with?
Day of the Dead from 1985, the third part of George A. Romero's zombie trilogy, which became 6 zombie films because they kind of sport the trilogy part. But yeah. And it is Halloween, honestly. It's not August.
Yeah, it is not the middle of August. It's funny, when we hit August, Jamie looked at me and said, we're not starting to watch Halloween movies yet.
Oh, yes, we are.
Yeah, no, don't worry. We don't have anything scheduled. Then immediately I was like, I'm watching Day of the Dead. She's like, you're on your own, bucko. So,
Go styley, go build up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So we kind of talked about this back in May, and we did Dawn of the Dead, and we, during that, I think we talked about Night of the Living Dead. So this was the third part, and I owned it as a kid. When I first started buying videos, this was one of the ones I kind of ran out, and I think got my mom to buy because I was too young, and I had it proudly on my shelf because obviously. It's known for the fantastic special effects and the gore. Didn't really watch it that much though. I'll be honest. It was not one that I reached for kind of like comfort. I think because even now, it's a very grim, dark film, really. And it's played very seriously. Very straight down the line. And I think audiences at the time. Chose Return of the Living Dead, which, had rock music and punks and Lena Quigley with no pants on. It's a lot more fun. But, and I love that movie. We should do that movie. But, as I get older, I think I kind of appreciate this one more because, like all Romero things, films, it's trying to say something.
I completely agree with. I think this was my first viewing. I'd not seen the movie before. I've talked before when we've done zombie films about how they're just not my thing a whole lot. And then when I watch one, I'm always like, yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
So I just hadn't really gotten around to it. And I will say, like, I agree. It's a grim movie. It's a dark,
nihilistic, isn't it? Nihilistic.
Yeah, and I think part of that is this movie doesn't really have anyone I really root for at any point. There's people who are worse than other people.
Yeah,
but
nobody's that likable, are they? Really?
Yeah, like I feel like Dawn of the Dead. Like I related to those characters more.
Yeah.
This has.
I will say this though. I will say this. Laurie Cardell, who plays Sarah, she's that kind of forgotten strong female character that you could put up with Sarah Connor Ripley. But just nobody remembers her, I think.
Well, I think her character is, I mean, those characters are kind of superheroes. I think that Laurie is in this film, or Sarah, I guess, is the character.
Mm.
Um, she's a lot more complex. She's a very real kind of person, as I think, despite some of the acting that happens in this film, because I don't think the acting in this film is near as strong as the two prior films.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like these characters are all very recognizable as just kind of people you might work with. Like they're
yeah,
not that no one's a Sarah Connor who you're like, wow, they've got a will of iron and we can all look
yeah,
to Sarah Connor. It's like Sarah in this film is um she makes a lot of bad choices. She's probably the closest thing they have to a moral compass. And even at
mm,
that, her moral compass starts spinning as the movie goes along, uh,
yeah,
as to whether she's doing the right thing. And clearly, she is the person who kind of accidentally screws them up by saving Miguel.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. That's very true. That is very true. Even though they are kind of falling apart anyway.
yeah,
Yeah, they're not going to last much longer anyway, I think.
yeah,
But I know what you mean. It's interesting because I think when I was younger, that's one of the things that I didn't like about this was there was no Kurt Russell or
hmm
whoever to come to who came to the fore as the film went on. Um, I don't know if I agree with you though, because I feel like the acting was never that great in any of Romero's zombie films. But I will say that in this one, I'm used to it, of course, because I've seen this a few times now. So I know what to expect. I think the first time I watched it though, I was like, they're all just shouting at each other all the time,
yes,
and they're very cartoony, a lot of them.
yes.
Um, and it's interesting that he made this between making the two Creepshow movies because I feel like that kind of rubbed off a bit.
I mean, definitely could have. They're just whatever. So, I mean, I don't know what you were told. Then you've taken acting and been an actor. It's been a long time since I've done any acting, but
Hmm.
I mean, I did high school drama, and at that time, maybe the one takeaway I got, I had many takeaways from my drama instructor, but one of the big ones was if all you're doing is going for angry, you're not doing
Yeah,
your job.
yeah, yeah. Well, there's nowhere to go, is there? There's nowhere
Yeah.
to go from there.
And the first 30 minutes of this film, after they return from, flying around Fort Myers and whatnot, is
Hmm.
very much just kind of, I was like, oh my God. Like I paused it at like at what turned out to be the 38-minute mark and was like, is this going to be the whole movie? Uh,
Yeah,
and it was not. Like immediately after that, the rest of the plot took off, but it was
yeah,
like people yelling at each other in a basement.
yeah,
It's like I get it. I mean I've seen enough zombie movies. I get it, but
yeah,
this is some rough going. Like this is not getting the plot cruising. And by the time this came out, we all kind of knew it. I would have assumed people kind of knew what the drill was with Dawn of the Dead not being that far in the past.
yeah, yeah. Well, this
But
is supposedly takes place not long after Dawn of the Dead,
yeah,
like in the kind of zombie timeline. I mean, obviously, Night of the Living Dead, you see the start of it. Dawn of the Dead, we're kind of at war. And I guess by this point, we're already kind of on our knees. Humanity's already on its knees. Um, but yeah, all the army figures, I think it would have been better if you'd have had one reasonable army guy because they're all such scumbags. And then on the other hand, all the scientists are like, apart from Sarah, kind of have I guess, their head up their asses, really. And, are like trying to prove these crazy theories that aren't going to help anything. Um, and then in the middle, you've got these two kind of like, drunk, stoned, very, looking at it now, very kind of like slightly racist in their depictions of where they're from, kind of pilots. there's one kind of like crazy Irish one, and there's one kind of like very Jamaican one.
Yeah.
And, and it's just like, yeah, you just kind of watch it, you're like, okay, do I care about any of these people really? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was the most fascinating to me about it really was, I mean, there were a lot of things that were interesting about it. It was more interesting to me than I was like enjoying it. As like I'm really into this movie,
Yeah,
but because it's been ripped off so much.
yeah, no,
This
that's
movie
true.
has been. I had no idea that this is like ground zero for like, oh, the military guys are going to be there, but they're without their chain of command and
Yeah,
without a direct line of being able to nuke somebody, they're kind of at a loss. They're just people with guns.
they're trying to kind of lose grip on the situations. They're kind of like getting paranoid and stuff.
Mhm.
I mean, also, yeah, it's just, I mean, how it's played again is very cartoony. Um, but you're right. I mean, we have seen this so many times since it came out, and even Romero himself is kind of ripping himself off a bit because there's another black helicopter pilot, same as Dawn of the Dead.
Mhm.
There's another kind of woman, who's kind of the main protagonist. So, and I feel like the end of this, it almost skips a beat how they escape. They're running towards the chopper. The chopper's almost surrounded by zombies. And then suddenly it's okay, they're on a beach. And I feel like Romero almost did that because he's like, I've kind of done this before, you know?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I was shocked that they gave them at least something of a bit of safety at the end of the film. That was a complete surprise to me.
Yeah.
Because
It's
when
near
they
to
were
a happy
leaving,
ending, isn't it?
yeah, I mean when they're leaving, it's oh, I hope they gassed up the helicopter. So I was expecting they were going to flip the switch and the helicopter wasn't going to go, and
Yeah.
then they'd cut to black or something. But I didn't have that much time to think about it. There's not that much movie left, but
Yeah.
it. But yeah, between that and like you said, the scientists kind of dicking around at the end of the world.
Well, you kind of think Logan might be onto something. Oh, by the way, I think the most likable character in this is Bub, actually.
I agree. Yes. And I told Stuart today, I was like, yeah, we're talking about Day of the Dead today. He's like, Bob, kind of like Bob. It's like, yes, I did.
Did he give you a very slow salute over Zoom? Um, but yeah, I mean, like, initially you think, oh, Logan, he might be onto something, and he can obviously, kind of hand roads. He can talk him around, but talk over him, kind of like because he's cleverer. But then, they find that tape where he's basically gone insane and he's going, Mother, Mother, don't hit me, Mother, and all that kind of stuff. And he's chopping up soldiers, and you're like, no, literally, like Frankenstein, there might have been a joke name, but he's kind of earned that, really. He's kind of gone nuts.
Yeah, I mean, you do look at what he's doing, and you're like, I mean, the science is impenetrable to me. I guess he's doing the right thing. Um,
But like she says, how do you transfer that onto millions of zombies if
yeah,
you have to train one at a time?
yeah. I mean, at the same time, I think there was an interesting commentary there about the approach of science sometimes in the middle of a very bad thing, which is something we just spent, 3 years dealing with of,
Yeah.
people saying they were going to spend 2 years investigating, the source of COVID and whatnot. And you're like, hey, how about we speed that up, buddies? Like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
think about just getting us to a solution. I'm glad you guys are going to go get your grant and go do whatever, but we're all sitting at home right now. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting how these movies like end up having the reflections back in the real world that you can kind of really point to.
Well, it's also like all Romero movies as well, zombie movies. The zombies are like a secondary threat, really. They're just kind of in the background, kind of waiting for us to fuck it up ourselves, really.
Mhm.
Whatever situation we've got. So, like in Dawn of the Dead, it's the bikers who cause more of a problem, and in this, it's basically the fighting between the scientists and the military.
Yeah, I think the idea of doing it in the missile silo or whatever the former mine was aesthetically an interesting idea. I think that it ended up being a little bit limiting as
Yeah.
far as like what visuals you were able to kind of have and what you could have your characters actually doing. Um, like
Well,
Dawn of the Dead.
apparently, like I did a little bit of reading about this, and apparently this was supposed to be like, the Gone with the Wind, the Lawrence of Arabia of the trilogy. He wanted to show the whole world, kind of like, falling apart. But then they cut his budget in half before production from 7 million down to about 3 million. Um, so he kept rewriting the script down and down and down to try to budget it.
Oh my God.
And it's interesting because this is obviously where they ended up, um, saving money. Because it's actually a pretty small cast when you look at it and stuff, and a pretty like you say, isolated, limited location. Um, but years later, when he did get some money and a bit of funding from like Universal, kind of gave him some money off, ironically, off the back of Shaun of the Dead being a hit. And Simon Pegg loves Dawn of the Dead. That's why he made Shaun of the Dead. Success of Shaun of the Dead allowed Romero to get some money to finally make Land of the Dead, which is more what I think he wanted this to be.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is more kind of like what would the world look like outside? After this has been going on for a few weeks or months.
Yeah, I've not seen Land of the Dead. I didn't see it because I hadn't seen the first three or the I'd only seen Night of the Living Dead, I
Yeah,
guess. And so I knew I had movies to catch up on, and so maybe that's next. But I
yeah.
have seen Return of the Living Dead, which is um, a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie.
Oh yeah, it's great stuff. It's like, but it's very tongue in cheek. Whereas this is any humor in this is almost like kind of the darkest by accident humor. Almost like
Mhm.
ironic humor.
Yeah, they kind of save it for like, oh, what a shitty day this clown must have been having when he got bit by his.
That's so true. That's so true. Well, there's that, and there's like, was it Rose shouting "choke on him" as they eat him? That's uh, that's always a great line.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess Barb. I guess the fact that Barb like chases him down the corridor, shooting at him, which I always find very funny.
Yeah, yeah. It is interesting to see Romero definitely had opinions about, and I guess it bears out in the next few movies that he finally got to make, but about the zombies kind of having some level of intelligence, which um
Yeah,
I don't really know where he's going with it. I don't really get where he was necessarily going with all that in this film, other than it caused more problems than it solved. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, like, it almost seems to be like the zombies kind of have a slight choice in how they act,
mhm.
which I think he does expand on a little bit in Land of the Dead, to show that they're not just totally unthinking kind of like creatures. Um, but like we were saying in here, I think the only thing you really see is the fact that, Bob is the most sympathetic. I think the best scene is actually where he finds Logan's body and he's kind of like, he's like a little kid. He's like, my chain came off. And then, the slow understanding that, this guy who he kind of likes gives him food is dead.
Yeah.
I think that's quite well done, actually.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't go into it. I mean, they did, I guess, but into kind of the socialization of reward and all that. It's kind of Psych 101.
Well, they
Um,
kind of, unfortunately, the reward is chopping up people, giving bits of people to eat.
yeah,
Which,
and that's the stuff I was digging in the movie of like the amazing perversion of that kind of stuff of, oh, he's making progress. Oh, he's using the guys who just got killed. Oh, that's not okay.
yeah, it seems to kind of go full circle. Really, it's like this is a great idea until you do that, and kind of like,
Yeah. I mean, and for all the we've been thinking about Rhodes as being this monster of a, whatever captain, sergeant, whatever he is of his group.
Yeah.
He's often not wrong. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Frankenstein is clearly out of his mind and a monster. Maybe
Yeah.
it's
And he's
not a
not,
good
and he's
thing
not
to
making
train the
progress.
zombies.
No, you're right. You're totally right. And he's not really making progress.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's like it's kind of more how he expresses himself. It's not like you say, it's not the fact that Rhodes is or the military is particularly wrong. It's just the fact that they're doing it way too aggressively, I guess.
yeah,
And there's no communication. It's funny because it's all about trying to communicate with the zombies, but of course there's no communication between the humans,
right. Yes, yeah, really good point.
which, like Logan says, that's what separates us from the lower forms. So really, I guess you could say the humans are de-evolving while they're trying to evolve the zombies.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, even if you're like, okay, I know the beats of this are going to play out, this way of like, we're going to see the zombies at the beginning, then they're going to be in the safe house, and then they're all going to kind of turn on each other. And then
Yeah,
whatever they do is going to lead to the zombies getting in, and then you're going to have the zombie, attack, and then some of them are going to escape at the end. Even if all of that
yeah,
is true, like in that, to some extent, that formula, which they did over and over, it's part of why I just couldn't get into Walking Dead, even if it had good stuff in it,
yeah,
was the when you contain it to a film, to a 2 hour movie or a 90-minute movie like this one, I feel like you're able to really get those points in there in a much more kind of intelligent and more, I mean, Walking Dead was not stupid. It was never a stupid show.
I
But
don't
you
know.
kind of get,
It might have become stupid from what I've heard, but
yeah, I mean, only watched the first season. I watched enough to know you guys should all know by now that when someone dies, you need to cut their head off immediately. Like all of you should have figured that out in the first 30 minutes of this show.
yeah,
And
shoot them in the brain. Shoot them in the brain.
absolutely set them on fire, do something. Uh, but yeah,
That's the problem with every film and TV show, though, isn't it? It's like people have to act like they've never seen a TV show or film.
well, even at that point in Walking Dead, there's a whole scene in like one of the last episodes where they're holding on to somebody so they can have the big emotional, I'm going to cry while the person I love turns into a zombie, then I'm going to kill him at the last second thing.
Yeah, make it more dangerous.
Yeah, it's like you would be like, yeah, I love them so much, I'm going to immediately shoot them in the brain.
Yeah, I'll mourn them later.
Like
Basically.
and I understand not everybody reacts to everything the same way, but I think if you had a little social unit, your social unit would come up with the rules pretty fast about what we need to do, and someone else will take care of it for you.
Yeah, and I
So
do like that. I do like that in this movie. How when Miguel, who does have the most questionable acting in this film, I think, gets bitten. She just chops his arm off, which is still pretty shocking, actually.
oh, that looks really good. All the stuff.
Yeah,
This movie has amazing effects, straight up and down.
it's Tom Savini, isn't it? Again from Dawn of the Dead.
Well,
Um,
Greg Nicotero is in this as an actor. I guess he's one of the characters. That guy
yeah,
is another Tom Savini. So this, I was started wondering if everybody in this was actually a makeup person. Uh,
yeah, yeah. I know the zombies themselves, they actually kind of asked people in the area, do you want to be a zombie for a day? And you were paid $1 and you got a hat saying I was a zombie in Day of the Dead. So you
I'd do
just
it.
turned up and they made you up and off you went for a day, which sounds great fun.
Yeah, it makes me now really. So they used to shoot one of the Walking Dead shows here, and now it makes me regret that I never like went to go volunteer to be a shambling zombie.
You could be yeah, in an episode somewhere.
Yeah, that'd been fun.
So yeah, watching this, like I say, definitely not something I kind of put on for fun or comfort or just to kind of chill. It always feels a little bit like homework.
Yeah,
Um, But another thing I love about it though, which I remember like my original video box years and years ago was lime green neon letters for the title on kind of like aquamarine neon for the actual case. And I think this is one of the most 80s films I kind of like enjoy. I feel like it's up there with Manhunter and Rambo 2. It's like it's so 80s. And I kind of love it.
Um, it's an interesting because it's an unpolished Hollywood 80s. The people
Yeah.
really look how people really looked in the United States in the 80s who were not movie stars.
Like Steel with his terrible haircut.
Yeah, they've all got terrible haircuts. Like to a person, Laurie's the only person, Sarah is the only person who gets away with having, well, and I guess John, the Rasta guy, has like a normal haircut, but
Yeah.
they all look like kind of
Dads.
dads, dads, dads who are playing a weekend band somewhere.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah. I like, even though the soldiers are total scumbags, I love that bit where Steele has to shoot the soldier who's been bitten.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell even he is a bit upset about that, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. Those are his buds. I totally I was also glad that they put that into the film and didn't have him like
Just
chicken
happily,
out.
yeah, or just happily, gleefully like mown down,
Oh, or that too. Yeah.
like an asshole.
Yeah.
I mean, it's those bits that make it for me. Like, a bit later, there's John as well, has a chance to kill Rhodes and he doesn't, because I think he looks at the other scientist who got shot and he's like, you can kind of tell he's going like, if I shoot him, I'm as bad as him, kind of. So
Mhm.
I do like those little bits.
Yeah, the setting I was I guess a former mine that has been, and this is
It's
like
kind
a
of
real
crazy.
business in Pennsylvania. They take these former mines and turn them into places where you can preserve, documents or whatever. It was kind of conceived as to like, okay, if there's a nuclear war, where are you going to put your stuff? Sort of
Yeah.
that concept. Um,
It's like the
and
end of Terminator 3, basically.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so like when I working in libraries and archives, like for a while when I was working in with one group, everything we did that we brought into our digital repository, we also sent a PDF copy to get put into a mountain in Pennsylvania. So I was looking up, is this it, before it got turned into that other place, the company
Hmm.
whose name I knew, and it was not the same one, but it's not too far away. Um,
Hmm.
so and I was looking at pictures of this place now, and they still have those RVs in there. There's still RVs like they showed. Like
Wow.
I mean, they're still
There was
places
a,
tucked around the country where if their nuclear bomb goes off, you'll be okay for a couple of years.
well, I mean, there's that bit in there where, yeah, you can see some of the stuff they've got, and there's a shot where there's a Model T Ford,
Mhm.
and I'm like, this is just so weird. Like the stuff they're kind of keeping for prosperity or whatever.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
mean, perfect place to hold up, I guess.
Well, as John, the Rasta guy's going through like the basically the archive
Record.
roster of like
Yeah.
everything they've got, and he's like, it's like all these financial records, and that's the kind of stuff that ends up getting stored because someone is told to take care of it. Uh,
Yeah.
and the movie does a really good job of kind of highlighting how absurd it is to hang on to some of that stuff, but it ain't
Yeah.
gonna matter, when the shit hits the fan. Um,
Yeah. It's
but
like you can't reverse it back to the old world. You've got to let it go, kind of.
yeah, I mean, what is it really going to matter what the third quarter earnings were for Exxon in 1982 after a zombie apocalypse? Like it's just not going to matter.
Well, there's that great shot early on when they first kind of go looking for people in the helicopter where they land and there's just money blowing around outside a bank.
Yeah,
And the paper with, the dead walk on the front cover. And that's all great, you know?
I will say this movie did something by accident, or it wasn't by accident because nothing in the frame of a film is by accident necessarily, but
Mm.
they showed an alligator, and
Yeah.
that made me think, wait, did everything on Earth turn into zombies? Because how would the comet going by make, any difference whether it was a human or a monkey or a turtle or
Yeah. Well, that's I mean, also I was thinking you said alligator. I think another good link for us into our kind of creatures that kill people. Managed to get another one in there just about. But after Crocodile and D had a crocodile, and of course before that we did Deep Rising and stuff. Um, but yeah, but also you're right. I mean, like I thought that like years ago because I think there was one film I saw that did have zombie birds, or the birds have gone weird. Um, but yeah, most films just kind of ignore that, or it only affects humans. Maybe because we have higher kind of like learning or higher kind of like functions. I'm not sure.
yeah, and I'd be willing to take whatever reasoning they wanted to give. I had just never, thought about it till then. And then there's a shot where Sarah and somebody else, the Irish guy, are walking. It's when they're going back to meet to find the Ritz the first time.
Yeah.
And there's a huge rubber bat that flies by in the cave.
So that happens a couple of times, and it's
Yeah.
like it's funny because it's kind of like yeah. I mean, it's just funny because it's almost like they have it in there to make kind of give it a funhouse type element, especially when they're running like they're trying to run away from all the zombies when they put in the corral later.
Yeah.
It just keeps kind of popping up, almost like a kind of like an old Bela Lugosi film.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I guess they just couldn't help themselves, or they knew it'd be too fun to have the bat in there. But they even add in the little like canned bat sound of like cheep cheep as it like flies by.
There are some cheesy jump scares like that in this. I did notice this time because I was like, and again, I've kind of grown up with it, so I'll probably give it a pass. But I'm like, if you go with the kind of theory that the dream sequence is always a big cop out in horror films, this does three of them.
That's
So it
true.
has the one at the start with a calendar, which is actually a pretty good start. I will say that. I like that one with all the hands. Um, but then later on, she has the one about Miguel turning over and all
Hmm.
his stomach falling out, which is kind of also, I mean, obviously reflects the fact that she saw that in Logan's lab. Um, but then there's the one right at the end as well, which is probably like the worst one, where especially as it jumps pretty violently from them running for the helicopter to being on the beach. But
Yeah. And I definitely had, and maybe I've been hanging out with Laura Maxwell too long, but I was like, well, is this her death hallucination as she's being murdered? Of like,
did
what's
she
going
drown at
to
the
happen?
start?
Yeah.
In the
But
scene?
I think the movie tells us they got away, so I'm choosing to believe they have at least a week on that beach before they have trouble.
Yeah, they actually got eaten by the alligator at the start of the film, and the rest of it is just a dream. The rest of it is a dream about being in Greece. They're going to run into the sea and start dancing, and then drown, and that'll be a dream as well. Then they'll wake up again.
It does.
um,
So it's been a while since I've seen World War Z. Um,
yeah, which I quite like. I mean, it is a PG, which I think kind of hobbles it. Um, but once you've got over that, I quite enjoyed it.
it's not a patch on the book. Like the book is awesome. Like and that kind of ruined the movie for me.
The
Uh,
book is awesome, but I would argue it would be, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it would be harder to make the book into a film because it's different people's perspectives from all over the world. So it would be very episodic, wouldn't it? That would make it probably a better.
yeah, I think now you do it on HBO as like 30
Yeah.
installments or something.
No, I totally agree with you. You could do that as like a 15-part series, and each episode is somebody's different experiences.
Yeah.
That would be, but I think in a film, it would be like, this is so, this almost like a kind of anthology movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they needed to do what they did, but I would be interested to go back because that was maybe, and I can't put my finger quite on why, but maybe because he was kind of running into different people dealing with the problems in different ways. But
Yeah.
that one kind of felt like this movie to me, like in both in
Yeah.
joyousness and but also in kind of what it was trying to handle. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. We should take a look at that because that was a very interesting film. Um, Also makes me laugh, World War Z, because at the end of it, I think the person in charge of the Who department was Peter Capaldi. Around the same time he became Doctor Who, so I think it was just before he became Doctor Who.
oh my god,
um, that was a good little nod, but yeah, with this film, I do like it, even though I think a lot of it is cartoonish. I think Rhodes is almost doing almost like a kind of like a spoof John Wayne. He's like, what the hell's going on? It just talks like that all the time. Um, and the Irish guy is very Irish and swinging from his hip flask like every 2 seconds. But if you can kind of get past those caricatures, I think there's some really good stuff in here. Some kind of like very meaty ideas. I mean, Romero never made a stupid film, you know, and I probably would agree that this is maybe the least of the trilogy, but it's still, I still really enjoy it. I think I enjoy it because each one has a different flavor as well, because they were made in different decades.
yeah, yeah. I would if you hadn't seen it, you might have the same reaction I initially did, which is, oh my god, this has been ripped off so much. Like
Yeah,
it almost feels unoriginal because it's the ground zero for a lot of these ideas. But um, once you kind of embrace that's what it is, and then like you were just saying, there's so many. It doesn't shock me now that I process it that this was a much bigger movie at one point because he crammed all of those ideas into this cave, right?
yeah,
And it's idea after idea, like just butting up against each other, and um, I wouldn't say it's overwhelming, but there's a lot to unpack as to kind of what they're kind of saying with each one of those ideas.
yeah.
So yeah, I think it's a smart movie. Like you said, he doesn't make dumb movies, and um, but yeah, it's not one I would put on for like, hey, people are coming over, let's pop in Day of the Dead. Like I would not do that.
No, it's not a six-pack movie. I
No,
mean, it's this isn't like totally on the nose, but I would say, if Return of the Living Dead is like E.T., this is kind of like The Thing.
yeah,
So, it's kind of similar kind of like material, but done in a totally different way. And I think audiences just didn't want it. They want a popcorn movie where they could have a laugh. And this is not that. I mean, this made pretty much all its money on, I think, VHS and rental. It didn't do very well at the box office at all. Um, I think the budget was about, like I say, about 3 million, and it finally, it kind of made a pretty respectable 35 million. But I think a lot of that was just rentals after the fact. It's like probably horror fans going, "You need to watch this for the effects." Um, so yeah, but it definitely has built up a bit more respect over the years. It's funny how even now though people go straight to Dawn of the Dead. They have Dawn of the Dead in the shopping mall. And that poster's on the wall of Simon Pegg's flat
yeah.
in Spaced, and that's what everybody references, and that's what had the big remake. Whereas this one's a bit lost in time.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think if that is true, part of it is that this movie is a really good, almost academic exercise, but it doesn't, like, in addition to the popcornness of like Return of the Living Dead, it just, as we said kind of at the outset, doesn't have a character in it that I love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you kind of like you need to. I mean, take Cameron and look what he did with like you already liked Ripley going
Yeah.
into Aliens, but your chance to like Hudson and Newt and like care about those characters in a different way
Yeah.
other than the humans want to survive. Um,
Yeah. No,
is
you're right. You're very right. I mean, like in Aliens, you pretty much care about even the guys who get killed off really early, like
mhm.
Apollo, the sergeant and stuff. They're hardly in it, but you're like, oh, I wish he hadn't been killed.
Yeah, and that's why you should have those humanizing scenes in the of them having dinner together and Apone smoking his cigar and being cool as shit. Um, so
They give
yeah,
you, have
they
you heard they give you
a
lip
little bit more of
cancer,
that.
Sarge? It's Hudson.
Yeah,
Um, well, yeah, and also, the acting in this isn't particularly naturalistic. I mean, it kind of is and it isn't, because I feel like it sways between trying to be very, well, very naturalistic, very kind of like, this is how they'd act, to totally over the top, turn up to 11.
yeah. I think
Um,
you had some trained actors, and then I think you had some people who are like Greg Nicotero, who's really a special effects guy, like in the cast. Um, and
yeah.
that's a tough thing with that material to find the right tone and balance.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I think Romero films have always been a bit like that. I mean, like even Dawn of the Dead, I mean, the three main protagonists are kind of good, but but they even in Dawn of the Dead, I think there's a few moments that you'll be like, oh, if we had a better actor, that would have come out a lot better. That line, and same with Night of the Dead, Living Dead. But I do feel like Romero was a big comic book fan, and it does. I really do think filming Creepshow either side of this, rubbed off a bit, maybe in a bad way.
I mean, it's gonna have an effect. I was thinking almost more of like Night Riders of which I saw a few years ago, and like Ed Harris is of course the lead, and he's great because he's Ed Harris. Um,
Yeah, hair.
you ever want to see Ed Harris with hair? There's 5 minutes where it happened, and he's in this movie. Um, but everyone it's harder for the other people to carry off that ridiculous material, and like Ed Harris is kind of selling the shit out of it, and I'm
Yeah,
not so sure everybody else is who's in that movie. So um,
yeah.
it's the trouble of having like I think in Night of the Living Dead you had a pretty good cast who understood their stereotypes, and you get into this and everyone's like, well, you're either a scientist or a soldier stereotype, and they didn't have enough kind of differentiating things, so they found kind of like, I'm the super annoying one, or whatever. I'm the one who always says the totally
And and
wrong.
so and so am I.
Yeah. Yes.
And so am I.
Yeah.
Says about five people.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, yeah. I think they just went for kind of character ticks, and then it got a bit out of control.
I'm curious as to, I guess, this Sherman Howard who played Bub.
Mm.
That guy is still out there in tons of stuff. He's just slugging away as a working actor, doing one-off appearances in regular TV shows here and there. He's doing movies here and there, video game voices. So
I'm sure.
he's a lot younger than I thought he was going to be. I mean, he's in his 70s, I guess now, but
So it must
I
have been, yeah, 20s or 30s when this.
yeah, he would have been like, yeah, just on the other side of like 30, I guess, at this point.
Yeah. Well, I know Bob apparently makes a cameo in the third season of Walking Dead. Um, so yeah, there's one episode where I don't know for how long, but you do see Bob. Yeah. So he's still out there.
That's awesome. I'm very happy to know that.
Um, Well, I honestly can't really think of anything else. I mean, well, I should talk about the sequels to this a little bit. So of course, there was a big gap where Romero, was a bit down on his luck in the kind of 90s, early 2000s. And then, like I say, to quote Excalibur, Merlin in Excalibur, your love brought me back. Simon Pegg success kind of brought back Romero as a viable commodity. So he got enough money to make Land of the Dead, which, isn't perfect again, but it's an interesting watch. It's more about like almost a city run by I don't really want to say a Trump type person, but Dennis Hopper kind of plays this almost like dictator who, the rich are very separated from the poor. And at the same time, they're dealing with the undead outside. So they keep having to make these runs in trucks to kind of get supplies. And it's okay. It's great. I kind of watched it. I enjoyed it. Didn't think it was as good as the original trilogy. And then a few years after that, there was Diary of the Dead, which a little bit, probably too late, felt like jumping on the bandwagon a little bit of the found footage. So it was like some acting students. It kind of rewinds those. So although, it was obviously made in, I don't know, 2008, it kind of rewinds to the start of the zombies coming back to life. But it has these acting students making a horror film. So they've got cameras. So we're seeing stuff from their point of view. And then, stuff starts going wrong and they're trying to get home. But then, they keep bumping into like, zombies or whatever. I really enjoyed that myself. There's a drunk teacher in that's very funny. And there's some kind of like, little jokes that they start at the top, like, when the girls goes, yeah, I hate horror films. Girls always get their blouses ripped off and you see their boobs. And then, of course, that happens in the film towards the end when the zombie grabs her. And then probably the least one was Survivor of the Dead, which was about like an island, which is kind of like keeping the zombies in check a bit because they are on an island, but two kind of warring kind of patriarchs, kind of paternal type figures fighting each other over, ownership of the island. That one was the least successful in my opinion, but I mean, all three of those, that new trilogy have their good points. I still think, step down from the original trilogy, but definitely worth a watch if you want more Romero zombie action.
Well, I really didn't know much about them except for remembering Land of the Dead coming out and the title of Diary of the Dead, but wasn't sure when it came out.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might be worth another Halloween or two from now. You could pick some of those up.
Yeah. That's a whole series. Just Romero zombie films.
But Simon, thank you so much for getting me to finally watch this one. And we're going to be doing Halloween movies all month long, as we tend to do. So if you're interested, do tune in. We're in August right now, so we're still figuring out what the rest of the schedule is going to be. But as always, Simon has ideas, and we'll run through those over the next few weeks. So I hope you tune in. I hope you're having a great October. And there's no zombies peering through your window right now thinking about eating your brains.
If there are, just salute them. So, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everybody. That about wraps it up for this edition of the Signal Watch. a production of the League of Melbotus. Thanks for sticking with us. If you enjoyed the podcast, we invite you to drop on by the Signal Watch blog, where you'll find write-ups of a wide variety of movies and more. We'd love to hear from you, so find us online and let us know what you think. Whether you prefer email, blog comments, or social media, we'll be happy to hear from you. We'll be back soon with more exceedingly high-quality content. So, until next time, God damn it, babies, you've got to be kind.